on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:06. It's O'Connor and Company on a, historic Friday morning as we react to the Democrat Party's use of the legal system for political purposes to convict their main political opponent, the person that the majority of Americans currently want to vote for president. And we've got full coverage of that monumental story coming up at 6:35 with lawyer and political columnist Kurt Schlichter. It's 7:05, former DOJ official Hans von Spakovsky, 8:05, legal analyst Jana Spilbor, and at 8:35, former member of the Trump campaign and Trump White House and communications political guru Sean Spicer. I am Larry O'Connor alongside Patrice Onwuka.
Happy Friday, Larry.
Thank you, Patrice. It is happy. We are happy warriors, and the warrior part is coming through stronger than the happy part this morning. But we still stay happy, we're going to rely on a lot of experts right now to sort of lead us through the legal aspects of this, what it means to the campaign, and what we can do about it. We'll kick things off with Dan Epstein. Now he is with America First Legal. He's an assistant professor at law at St. Thomas University in Miami, and also a former special assistant to the president and senior associate counsel to the president. Thank you, Mr. Epstein, for joining us today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Well, I mean, I've been saying at least that this is expected. We shouldn't be surprised, but there is something jarring when you hear this officially announced out of this Manhattan jury and from this judge. Everybody is saying that this is very overturnable. Even liberal political analysts and legal analysts are saying this should be overturned on appeal. Is that what you expect? And what do you think the timetable would be on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that it's fairly clear that there are a number of constitutional and procedural errors that justify an appeal. And you're right. I mean, I'm on a law faculty, and I have colleagues who have very different philosophical views than I do, and yet they think that this is obviously a case where this should be reversed on appeal. The problem, of course, is that that's not going to happen anytime soon. And even if the former president wins a reversal on appeal, that's obviously not going to happen until after the election.
Well, Dan, talk about the appeals process, the appellate process. Would that be through federal courts? Would he potentially be able to go straight to the Supreme Court? How is this going to work?
Yeah, so former President Trump needs to go through what is called the appellate division of the appropriate department, which I think it's the first department where he's located in Manhattan. And now, what's unique about this New York State court system is ultimately, even though he's in the Manhattan Court of Criminal Appeals, the Manhattan Criminal Trial Court, and he's not in a civil Supreme Court, that's what they call in New York the trial courts, he has to bring the case up to the First Department Appellate Division, and then ultimately the New York Court of Appeals. The only way in which former President Trump could get into federal court is if he was to actually directly sue Judge Mershon, his court, in U.S. District Court. But this is likely something that's going to stick in state court and have to go up to the New York Court of Appeals before there's any Supreme Court review.
Even if this directly affects a presidential election, or is it because the grounds of this aren't connected directly to the 2024 election, then it's not valid?
Yeah, well, we know it directly affects an election, and that was in the motion practice. In this case, there was all sorts of attempts to delay, to dismiss, and Judge Mershon denied all of those. Those are certainly going to be issues that are up on appeal in the appellate division. But, unfortunately, the way that our court system works is that this is for criminal cases, it's very hard to say a case gets transferred to a federal court when it's originally brought in state court.
It was also interesting to me, Professor Epstein, that they decided to schedule the sentencing hearings to begin July 11th. That is the same week as the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Does it have to be delayed for, 6 weeks? Can't they get to the sentencing process immediately? I was under the understanding that the judge theoretically could sentence him immediately after the verdict came in. And since he has no prior convictions, and this is a white-collar crime that has never been applied in this way in the history of a Manhattan courtroom, is there any chance that they will actually justify jail time here?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot there. So I think the first thing is that, no, it's great. I think the first thing is that given the novelty of the situation, often judges at sentencing, it actually becomes a quite almost like a mini trial in terms of briefing and fact statements about how the judge should determine penalties. And I think here you're absolutely right. This is so complex, it's so novel that there's a high likelihood, particularly for white-collar crimes, that there's probation or a fine. Now, I think the judge, what you see as delay, the judge is probably saying, look, this is actually pretty early, given that there's going to have to be all sorts of post-trial briefs, all sorts of arguments about what guidelines we use, these sorts of things. And of course, right, I think if you're the former president, you want to get these things moving as quickly as possible before the election. And yet, I think everybody knows that this decision that happened yesterday is going to have severe implications for the election.
So, Professor Epstein, thinking through, you talked about there are lots of ways that this could be overturned on appeal. What are one or two of the most glaring things that stick out to you that are so egregious the case should be overturned, or all these convictions should be overturned? What are those one or two things that you see?
I mean, it's a great question. To me, the first thing is that we cannot have state prosecutors enforcing federal law. And what this case boils down to, at a minimum, is that Alvin Bragg decided that he was going to use the Federal Election Campaign Act as a predicate crime to go after the former president. I'm sorry, we have a Congress. We have a U.S. Department of Justice. We have a Federal Election Commission. Congress writes the laws. Those agencies enforce the law. We don't let state prosecutors enforce the law. If that's true, your next-door neighbor who might really dislike you might become a city district attorney one day and decide to enforce federal law against you. It's a total disruption of our system of law. I think the second thing is that we have enormous procedural problems with the whole statute of limitations question. What statute of limitations means is when you can bring your suit or when is it time barred, because prosecutors don't get forever to prosecute people. We don't certainly prosecute people after they're dead. So the question here, though, is that Governor Cuomo issued a emergency declaration during COVID that suspended prosecutions. He did not say, oh, and by the way, when these are suspended, we're going to add that time back after the fact. It is totally unprecedented, wholly unheralded, the idea that after an emergency declaration, you can then, which justifies suspensions of civil liberties, you can then, after the declaration, when there's no emergency, suspend someone's civil liberties. And that's exactly what's happening here. Former President Trump, his civil liberties are being harmed because the prosecutors are saying, well, the statute of limitations was on hold, but that doesn't mean we can't just add the math back on the back end. And that is wholly scary. That scares me.
Quickly, Professor, because we are out of time, but I'm going to ask, we have so many lawyers joining us today from different walks of life and different perspectives. You are a law professor now, but you've also served in a political capacity for the president and for the White House. There's two thoughts right now, which is that Republicans who are in a political office right now should take the high road, should demonstrate to the country, to the people, and to their political opponents on the other side that we do respect the rule of law and we won't wield power the way the Democrats have by utilizing lawfare. That's one school of thought. The other school of thought is, okay, fine, they're not going to stop this until they have to taste their own medicine. And if they've decided to cross this Rubicon, so should Republicans. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, that's a very good question and a very easy question. The first is Republicans are always principled and have not used these tactics. The second answer, and the more direct answer, is because Republicans are principled, they've never successfully been able to use these tactics. So why start now? You're not going to be successful at it. You're upstanding citizens. You're principled. to do these kinds of lawfare tactics, you have to have a very Manichean view of the world. You have to be amoral, and Republicans are never going to succeed about that because we have principles.
We're too good. Dan Epstein, thank you, sir.
Thank
You're
you,
going to have a
Dan.
busy day. Appreciate all the work that America First Legal is
Yes.
doing, too, by the way. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
It is 6:16.